Circe did not turn Scylla into a monster because she hated her. She did it because her own heart had already been shattered, and she could not bear to watch someone else hold the love that should have been hers. That single act of transformation, poisoning the water where Scylla bathed, watching the 6 snarling dogs erupt from her hips, has echoed through 3,000 years as one of mythology's most brutal punishments. But what if we have been reading the motive wrong? What if the woman we call a jealous sorceress was actually a broken soul lashing out in the rawest kind of grief? The answer lies not in Scylla's fate, but in the man who stood between them. We all think Circe was a petty villainess who turned a beautiful nymph into a monster out of pure spite. The reality is that she was acting from a wound that never healed, unrequited love that curdled into something far more desperate than hatred. Hatred would have been clean. Hatred would have been straightforward. What Circe felt was a tangle of longing, rejection, and humiliation so deep that she could not stand to see the object of her obsession happy with someone else. And that someone else was Glaucus, a mortal fisherman turned sea god who had come to Circe for a potion to make Scylla love him. Imagine that moment, the most powerful enchantress in the world. Surrounded by lions and wolves, she had turned from men, and a handsome god walks in and asks for help winning another woman. The irony is almost unbearable. Circe fell for him instantly, and Glaucus, whether out of loyalty to Scylla or simply not feeling the same spark, refused her. He left her alone on her island with all her magic and none of the one thing she craved. That is the heartbeat of the story. A woman who could command nature, who could turn armies into pigs, who had tamed the very beasts of the wild, was powerless against her own emotions. She offered Glaucus everything, and he walked away for a nymph he had known only a short while. So when Glaucus went to Scylla, when they began their romance, Circe watched from a distance. She gathered herbs from the most poisonous corners of her garden, aconite, hemlock, the sap of yew, and brewed a potion that would change Scylla forever. Then she slipped into the bay where Scylla bathed, poured the mixture into the water, and waited. As the nymph waded deeper, the water began to boil. From her waist down, 6 snarling, ravenous dog heads burst through her skin, each with its own snapping jaws. Scylla screamed, but the transformation was irreversible. She became a fixture in the Strait of Messina, a terror to sailors, a monster who ate 6 of Odysseus's men in one gulp. But Circe did not laugh. She did not gloat. According to the oldest versions of the myth, she wept. Here is the paradox that most people miss. Circe made Scylla a monster not because she hated her rival, but because she could not stand to see Glaucus love her. And that love, so easily given to Scylla, was the same love Circe had offered and had been denied. The act was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was the desperate attempt of a heartbroken woman to erase the evidence of her own failure. If Scylla were no longer beautiful, no longer desirable, then perhaps Glaucus would turn around. Perhaps he would finally see Circe. But of course it did not work. Glaucus was horrified. He abandoned the transformed Scylla and retreated into the sea, never to love again. Either Circe ended up alone, angry, and more isolated than before. Her magic had given her the power to destroy the thing she envied, but it could not build the connection she craved. This is the tragic truth at the core of the myth. Vengeance is not the opposite of love. It is love twisted by rejection into something that looks like hatred but feels like a scream. To understand how a woman capable of such terrible magic could also be capable of such raw vulnerability, you have to look at the whole of Circe's life. She was the daughter of Helios, the sun god, and the nymph Perses. She grew up in a palace of golden light and absolute isolation, surrounded by titans and gods who treated her as an afterthought. Her brother Aegeus became the king of Colchis, keeper of the Golden Fleece. Her sister Pasiphae married King Minos and gave birth to the Minotaur. Circe, in contrast, was married off to a minor prince of Colchis, And when she poisoned him to death during an argument over his inheritance, her father exiled her to the island of Aea. There she built her world from scratch, learning every herb, every incantation, every spell that existed. She became the most powerful witch in Greek mythology, yet she was utterly alone. When Glaucus walked onto her shore, he was the first person in centuries to arrive with a request rather than a threat. She saw in him a chance at connection, and he used her for a love potion. Think about how absurd this situation really is. Here is a man who has been transformed into a god by eating a magical herb, who can swim through the deepest oceans and command the tides, and he cannot get a nymph to fall in love with him without outside help. So he goes to the one woman who could solve his problem, the same woman who will immediately fall in love with him, the same woman whose betrayal will create one of the most famous monsters in all of literature. The chain of events is so tightly wound that it feels like a cruel joke by the fates. Glaucus could have tried to win Scylla on his own. Circe could have refused to help him. Scylla could have stayed out of that particular bay. But none of them did, and the result was a sea monster that would terrorize ships for centuries, all because a god was too lovesick to notice the sorceress falling apart right in front of him. Now let the facts hit you one after another, fast and unforgiving. Circe's transformation of Scylla is the direct cause of 6 of Odysseus's men being eaten in the Odyssey. The monster Scylla shares her name with a rock formation on the Italian coast, opposite the whirlpool Charybdis, and sailors had to choose between the two. The phrase, "between Scylla and Charybdis," still means a choice between two equally terrible options. Greek vases from the 6th century before the Common Era already depict Scylla with fishtails and dog heads, proving the story is at least 2,700 years old. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, written around 8 years after the Common Era began, Circe's motive is explicitly jealousy. But Ovid also includes the detail that Circe was in love with Glaucus and devastated by his rejection. The philosopher Apollonius of Rhodes added that Scylla was originally a nymph beloved by the sea god Poseidon, which only deepens the tragedy because Circe's action also offended a major deity. And finally, Circe herself later helps Odysseus navigate past Scylla, warning him that no mortal can defeat her, only avoid her. The enchantress who created the monster is also the one who teaches heroes how to survive it. So where does that leave us? The mystery posed at the start. Was Circe driven by hatred or heartbreak? Resolves not into a simple answer, but into a messy human tangle of emotion. She did not hate Scylla. She did not even know Scylla personally. What she hated was the reflection of her own loneliness that Scylla's beauty and happiness threw back at her. Circe acted out of a broken heart, yes, but a broken heart that had been shattered so long ago it had forgotten what wholeness felt like. She had spent centuries on that island, talking to lions, brewing potions, watching the sun rise and set with no one to share it. And then Glaucus came, and for a few moments she thought maybe her exile was over. But he left, and she snapped. The monster she made was not Scylla. It was herself. Now, ask yourself this: if you had the power to change the world when your heart broke, would you have done any differently?